Hey everybody, my name is Jim Farmer. I'm an arts reporter based out of Atlanta. I also coordinate Out on Film, the LGBTQ film festival in Atlanta. According to the Trevor Project's 2022 national survey of nearly 34,000 LGBTQ youths aged 13 to 24 across the United States, with 45% of respondents being LGBTQ youth of color and 48% being transgender or non-binary, suicidal thoughts have trended upward toward LGBTQ young people over the last 3 years. The new documentary Anxious Nation, directed by Academy Award winner Vanessa Roth and co-directed, written, and produced by 21-time New York Times bestselling author Laura Morton and executive produced by Kathy Ireland, takes a deep look into the global crisis of anxiety and mental health as it affects Americans, especially its crippling impact on adolescents, including LGBTQ family and youth and family. Anxious Nation will kick off Mental Health Awareness Month with a global live stream rally premiere event hosted by Joan London on May 3rd, 2023. The film will then open nationwide in theaters and online on May 5th, 2023. I've seen this documentary. It is so powerful. Thank you both for making it. Please welcome Vanessa Roth and Laura Morton.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I watched this film and it really hit home for me because it's just very powerful. I mean, what made you want to make this documentary?
So this documentary was a film that came about because I'm the mother of an anxious child. I have an anxious teenager. And I was sitting at my desk one day feeling incredibly defeated as a parent. I felt like no matter what we were doing, her anxiety just didn't seem to be getting better. It was getting worse.
Yeah.
And this was back in 2018, Jim.
Yeah.
And so I put a post on Facebook, Kids and Anxiety, who's dealing with it? And I was really, really surprised by the response that we got because like on Facebook, people were like, I am, we are, my niece is, but it was the private messages that I got that really rocked my world. It was as if that one line on Facebook gave permission for people to talk about something that we weren't talking about in 2018. And as a storyteller by trade, I thought there's something here. I was really curious what was going on, why. I wanted to know if we were more anxious or if we were just more aware of it. And then there were all sorts of other questions that came about from that. So in 2019, I started to make the film, and I went out, looking for answers. And along came COVID and poured a little gasoline all over that burning inferno. And my question about whether we were more anxious or just aware of it just kind of became moot, because I think we're all struggling with anxiety on some level these days. I certainly don't know any families not going through it. So that was the genesis behind the film.
Okay. All right. In terms of arranging all the subjects and experts, because you have some amazing conversations. I imagine you probably had more that you couldn't include in this, but how did you all go about arranging the people who would actually be in the film?
So I'm going to take that one too. Um, it was really interesting. Once you start talking about this subject, it's an invitation, and so it wasn't as difficult as you might think it was. I just started putting out the word that I was looking for people that were struggling with their mental health, struggling with anxiety, and people just started coming forward. And if it wasn't, somebody I knew directly, it was somebody they knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I read an article in Vice. I want to say sometime in like the summer of 2019, and it was an article about the crisis of mental health on college campuses.
Yeah.
And I actually tracked down the author of the article, and as it turns out, he was a junior at William and Mary College,
Okay.
and he wrote this amazing article. And the kids that he wrote about in this article were at various universities all over the country, and he put me together with quite a few of them that ended up being in our film. And but it was really through, I even put an ad on Nextdoor, and anybody who's struggling that wants to share their story with us. So it was a variety of ways that we found our subjects. We wanted them to have, we were looking for diversity in not just cultural diversity, but we wanted diversity in terms of how anxiety was showing up. We wanted diversity in their location. So we didn't want a bunch of people from New York and LA.
Exactly.
We wanted people from all over the country because the hypothesis was does it impact somebody that lives in a city differently than somebody that lives in the country? Does it impact somebody, who's comes from the Black and Brown community differently than somebody who, does not? What is the LGBTQ plus impact? And so we really wanted to look at that from every single angle.
Okay. Vanessa, did it surprise you the number of people who deal with anxiety?
No, unfortunately, no. The story that I talk about with getting involved with the project was that I knew it all too well from my own kids and their friends, and actually felt like it was so close to home that when Laura asked me to be involved, I actually didn't feel like I really wanted to dive in to anxiety and depression and all of these things in a work mode when I was dealing with it at home with my own kids and their friends and seeing kind of what was happening to this generation of kids. And so I don't think it surprised me. I think what I loved about making it was actually being able to just really understand the interior of a young adult and a teenager, and to really give voice to them through the artwork that we use in the film, and the idea that this question of kids feeling safe to show up as their authentic selves, to me was just so important. And I think that that was the thing that I wanted, that I was, I guess, not surprised, but happy to hear that the kids were so willing to share that interior and internal experience with the crew and be so open and vulnerable, and the parents to be so open and vulnerable, so that the audience could relate and start taking some of those layers of shame and guilt and all that stuff, off the table.
That leads perfectly into my next question. I'd love to get thoughts from both of you. Can you talk about the stigma of mental illness and why some people don't feel comfortable talking about this?
I mean,
Yeah.
sure, I start. I mean, I think, there's a history of it in, policy wise, the way that we treat people who have any kind of mental health issue at all. It's been sort of politically and policy wise put into this category of other. And then emotionally and in families, there's this feeling of like, buck up, and we've all been through a harder thing and just get over it. And this sort of, I don't know if that's a very American thing or if it's, all of the world, but I know for sure in America, there's that sort of feeling of like, oh, you have to deal with it. But I think that actually all comes from probably a history of a lack of skills and knowing really what to do with it. And we don't, as humans, I don't think handle things that we're afraid of very well on a whole. And so I think, I think mental illness has gone into that category of things that are people are afraid of approaching with, love and support. And then there's, again, the policy side of resources have never been put into helping people that are handling these kinds of things, because we all, I mean, I think it's become so much more of the collective now that we talk about it, but it's not like it's anything rare or uncommon or other or anything like that. It's such a part of being human and living in this world.
Okay.
We address this in Anxious Nation. Culturally, there are some communities that really just look down on mental health issues, and they consider it to be a weakness, right? So, if you drink or you smoke pot or whatever it is to deal with your issues, that's not a problem. But if you see a therapist, that's a problem, right? And so it's, and it's Taraji P. Henson in our film, is testifying in front of Congress, and she says, in the Black community, we were taught to pray our worries away. And so I think culturally there's a lot of issues, but there's so much distrust in those communities, especially in the system, right? The medical system start there. There's a lot of, disparity in the system, and it doesn't treat everybody equal. And so the fact that there are no resources or very few resources or accessibility to resources, particularly in lower socioeconomic communities, I think it becomes, it just becomes something that they just don't talk about. And, it's a sad commentary because, we've criminalized mental health in this country. And, if you're walking down the street and you have a heart attack and you fall to the ground, they're going to call an ambulance for you. But if you, walk down the street and you have a psychotic break, they're calling the police.
Jeez.
And you're going to jail. And, that's happening in our country in 2023. And that's just, on so many levels, it's wrong.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I watched this over the weekend, and then I had a physical yesterday. And as I was watching this film, I was like, wow, this is me. I mean, because I suffer from anxiety, and it's not something that I really feel comfortable talking about. But but I talked to my doctor. So I was watching this. I was like, and this is me. I'm anxious all the time, and I'm glad to know that it's not just me. But I mean, I wake up in the morning hyper and running around. But I mean, what I really related to in the film are the people who just really had a hard time talking about this or really opening up to others. Do you find that that's normally the case for everybody?
I think, for some people, they want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think for some people, it's such a great release, right? And I think for other people, there's still so much shame attached to it, as if there's something wrong. And, it's funny you bring up going to the doctor because, there's a doctor in the film who says, if we treat everything else with more seriousness, so that if you had a rash, you'd be at the drugstore getting cortisone. And if the rash didn't go away, you'd be in a dermatologist's office. You wouldn't think twice about it, right? And, so I think, unfortunately, I think that, well, I will say this. I think that it's getting better in terms of people talking about their anxiety. Where that divides for me is, what are we doing about it?
Exactly.
Right. So I think a lot of the Let's Talk About It campaigns have been really, really successful. And we know that because we're seeing kids going, to their mental health, um, offices, on college campuses, but they're so inundated and overwhelmed that they are simply not equipped for the demand. But that's because we are getting people to become more and more aware of it. So I think one of the things that we really hope to do with Anxious Nation is not only, start the conversation, but offer some helpful, resources. And not only that, but I think offer hope. Hope that your anxiety does not need to define who you are. And I thank you very much, Jim, for sharing that you have anxiety. It's a very brave thing to do, because it's so personal, right? So I think it's just great that you just shared that with us.
Thank you. Well, thank you for making this some. I mean, so much has gone on over the last 3 years, obviously with COVID, and there's such an increase in violence in the country and the world. There's more bullying. Can you talk about how all that has added to the anxiety level for a lot of young people?
I mean, I want to say, to adding to what Laura, you were talking about, and Jim, what you're talking about that anxiety, I think, and Shafali, who's somebody in the film too, talks about, like, you're not wrong to feel anxious. This is that regardless of history and whether people have been anxious in the past or whatever, there are external forces in this world right this minute that make make absolute sense that a person would feel anxious. That's the normal response to sort of the things that are going on that can, impact kids and teenagers and adults alike, right? So I think also you talking to your regular doctor about it is important as well, like that we also in the film talk about that mental and psychological, emotional well-being has to also be thought of in the same way as the physical, right? It's all connected, right? We're systems that are all connected with all of those things. And so talking to your doctor, your general practitioner about anxiety is a good start. And that should start with pediatricians, with kids as well. This is something that we should be talking about all the time because it is just part of wellness. So I think, yeah, just to your question too, about this sort of both the internal and the external factor about anxiety is I think just accepting that this is true. And that, like Laura said, it's the idea of how do we cope in this world right now? And how do we help our kids cope and have some skills? Because the anxiety, the influences that are coming in, whether they're political, environmental, policy, they're not going to go away. And so it's how do you manage, and how do you manage as a person that's feeling vulnerable? And how do we as the adults and families support those, you know, those kids. And I think one of the things that, I mean, I think all the people, I brought this up a little bit, but all the kids, I think in our film, one of the main things is how adults really need to support kids being their authentic selves. And the more that we as parents can see and hear them and value what they say and who they are and appreciate who they are, that may be different than ourselves or what we thought or whatever it is, and to show up for our kids, I think, and not just parents, but friends of parents and friends of kids and teachers, and the community. To me, that's a big, that's something that just resounds really loudly for me always with the kids in our film and the kids that I know, is in us really very deliberately accepting our kids for who they are and show up as and want to be in who they are naturally. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Can you talk about the high numbers of anxiety in LGBTQ youth, and why that is so high? Because growing up for anybody is so difficult, but when you have so many other factors going, but can you just talk about why those numbers are so high?
Vanessa, do you want to run or?
Do you want to start? Either way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a professional, but I can give you my opinion. I think there's so much stigma attached still in this country to being openly gay.
Yeah.
And I think we're moving in the wrong direction. And I think when you compound that with not being able to live your authentically who you are, that absolutely plays a factor in how we feel about ourselves. And that all kind of circles back to anxiety. I think in the movie we tell a very important story of a young man who is not out to his father, and he's not out to his father because his father has already rejected him.
Yeah.
And it's really heartbreaking because I feel that in this day and age, I just can't imagine that we're still dealing with this subject, but we are. And so for me, I think that it's a double whammy. I think that, there's so much growing dissension and anger and, people who don't live the way that we live and, what the Bible says or what, there's so many factors that go into this. How can that not make you anxious?
Exactly.
How could that not make you anxious? So I think that and I think that's also true for other communities, but I think especially the LGBTQ plus community, I feel like that's why we're seeing these staggering numbers, and the rates of suicide are exponentially higher. And, that's just very problematic. And I think it was very important to me and to Vanessa to talk about this in the film. To make sure that there was representation, because that is set, that the story is in the numbers.
Yeah, and then I think to add to that as well is, and during COVID as well, when people were more isolated from each other, I think that kids and teenagers who are grappling with sexuality and identity and things that they need support and encouragement around, they may feel isolated, whether they're at home or in school, and just really not understand that there is a community that can support in a way that, again, like you said about the shame of just the mental health part of this, and now you're compounding that with not feeling accepted just for who you are as a human being. I think that, these are that the population of kids and teenagers that really, again, need the most support are those who feel, like I said before, are being told that they're other, and told that
when things get politicized, like being transgender, when that turns into a political conversation, I think it really, it leaves a mark, a very deep wound. Because if you are somebody who's struggling with, your gender identity, and with all of the dialogue that's happening in the world right now around transgender, why would you want, why would you want to say this is who I am when people are being attacked every which way for it?
Exactly.
And yet, back to Vanessa's point, we must allow our kids to authentically be who they are, not who we want them to be. That was one of the most eye-opening takeaways for me from this, process of making this film. I think parents, we put our own desires on our children.
Mhm.
And, I think we want our kids to do well, and we want them to succeed. And we think if there's anything that might stand in the way of that, we certainly want to protect them from that. But
Exactly.
we have to allow our kids to be who they are.
Exactly. The young man that you were talking about, Carl, there's so much pain um, in the relationship or the non-relationship between his father, and you deal and you double that with the regular anxieties of being a teenager and being out. I can't imagine that's such a stressful situation. Either one of you talked to Carl since the film was finished?
I've reached out to Carl a few times. He's in law school.
Yeah.
He's doing great.
Yeah.
He didn't want to go to law school. He went because his father wanted him to go.
Okay.
And but he's there and he's doing great. And and like all of the kids in our film, they're all incredibly proud to be a part of this story, because they know that their stories will help others feel seen and heard. And their vulnerability and their willingness to be so raw on camera really makes a difference, I think, in the storytelling.
Exactly. Have you had many screenings of this film? And if so, what kind of reactions do you get from people who have watched this, especially with an audience?
Vanessa, why don't you take that?
Yeah, I mean, Laura, you probably know more about like exactly how many and where we've been, but yeah, but I feel like the responses have always been really great. We've had full houses everywhere we go, and the thing that I think both Laura and I have been very moved by is that teenagers and kids will come, and we expect that they'll hopefully see themselves, reflections of themselves or of their friends, and then parents, that's all great, and teachers, that's great. But what's been really interesting to me is we've had a lot of more of like a grandparent age of people who come and see it, and they come because they're trying to get some skills and some understanding of a younger generation, and to be able to talk to that younger generation. And I've just really appreciated them being in the screenings, because it's really shown too this need for this, the intersection of generations and how important that is in community and understanding about how we all sort of connect and communicate. So yeah, the feedback has always been very strong, and people want to start telling their stories. And I think, again, the screenings have even been almost like a nice, again, to talk about, again, that shame factor. It starts lifting that veil, because there's the safety, and it's become a safe space, which has been really nice to watch.
We've created a sense of community. We've done 11 film festivals.
Wow.
And and we have our last festival as we're Julian Dubuque this month. And then we are taking the film to the masses starting May 3rd. We have a global live stream. And the spirit behind the global live stream is to create a sense of community, that we are not alone, that we are all in this together. And so you can go to anxiousnation.com and you can buy your ticket, and there will be a live wall where you can, while you're watching the film, people will be, talking on the wall and reaching out, and there'll be people from all over the world. And then on May 5th, we open theatrically in New York and LA. And we will also have the film available VOD. Again, go to anxiousnation.com and you'll be able to see where and how to watch the film. We do intend to take it out to theaters all over the country. We really hope to come to Atlanta. But we're really, we're thrilled. I will say that the response that we've had has been exceptionally good. And not only have we done film festivals, we've done a lot of special screenings with schools and local organizations. And we have many of those coming up. We've now partnered with NAMI. So we're working together with NAMI and the JED Foundation and several others. The whole point of making Anxious Nation was to bring this information to communities and make it available. Mm-hmm. And not only make it available, but to create that sense of connection, even if we're all members of the Anxious Nation, right? There is a sense of connection by being a part of that. And so we we really want people to walk away feeling like their anxiety doesn't define who they are and that there's hope, because with, anxiety without hope is, turns into something much worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's the other piece too that we talk about in the screenings when we've had like Q&As after, and this thing of like, so what do you do? What are those, there are the resources, there are skills. And the one big thing, and especially in this, I think, day and age when there is so much need out there in the world, that it seems that anxiety really can be dealt with in a really beautiful way by finding something that gives you purpose and meaning, and can sort of turn that, as they say about like sort of that anxiety is just energy. And if you can refocus that energy on something that means something to you. So, helping another person that's dealing with anxiety, or helping, with any kind of situation that you feel like you are serving a purpose that's sort of larger than yourself. And I think that speaks to any of us, whatever our sort of spiritual or psychological beliefs are, educational beliefs or political beliefs. There is something out there for you as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, that can give you a feeling that that you matter. And I think that goes a long way to helping with anxiety.
One more quick question. What's the website?
So the website is anxiousnation.com.
Okay.
And we have a lot of resources available on the website, including resources for the LGBTQ plus community. We are partnering with many, many organizations to widen that. We want to become the most trusted go-to resource for all things anxiety. Okay. So the people that we're working with are vetted, they're top tier. You'll have instant access to information. But again, you can join us for our global live stream on May 3rd. That starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And we are really looking forward to having people, see this film. We're really excited because we know, much like you, when you watch this film, you can't not think about it, and you can't not share it with your friends. It's something that people talk about and think about for days. And so we're excited, and we're so happy to share our film with you today, Jim.
Great. Thank you so much. Anxious Nation, after the event on May 3rd, will be open nationwide in theaters in New York and LA on May 5th, and it will be available on video on demand. Look on the website, you can find where to find that. I think this film is going to have a tremendous impact. It did on me. Thank you both for talking to me, and thanks for sharing this film.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye.